Welcome back to Trauma, Drama, and Life. I'm your host, Ben Taylor, and my wife,
Kayla Taylor.
We're super excited to be back here and talking with you. Just want to say, first off, starting that we are super thankful for all the support we've been given just in this podcast. As we're recording this is episode number 5. And after the 4 episodes launched, the podcast spiked all the way up into the top 100 under relationships in the United States, which is just, it blows my mind.
Yeah, I think it blows both of our minds.
We're not expecting
that at all.
Right.
So thank you guys so much for your support and just listening and tuning in with us each week.
Yeah, so thank you so much. If you guys are new here, feel free to be able to check out any of the episodes on Apple Podcasts. Like, share, and if you can, just review it. Give us a rating to be able to help just spread the news of what we're trying to do, how we're trying to help people, and how we're trying to influence people to grow, heal, and change. So I have my whole platform under Raw Motivations. My wife, I have some of her links attached underneath to some of her YouTube and Instagram. Yeah, YouTube and Instagram of stuff that you can kind of see from her perspective, not always from like the narcissistic aspect, but just like life. So you can see that we're humans and we have life that goes on behind the scenes too, right? So we've had a couple people that have put in, questions and comments either through the email or if you've seen some of like the polls that we put up on Instagram. So thanks so much for the engagement. We wanted to go ahead and kind of dive into this episode, going over a couple main topics, some of like reactions, reacting to one another, Kayla reacting to me, dealing with that, dealing with like the symptoms, like the stress symptoms that come with being with a narcissist, being with that type of a person, and then also kind of some of our like arguments and how we like manage conflict then, and then what it looks like now.
Yeah.
So anyways, let's go ahead and just dive right in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess starting off, kind of like reacting and stressors that I used to have, definitely during a lot of conflict, probably a couple years ago, would end up in, we are both very logical people, and so we both always come into like disagreements or conflict from a logical aspect. And so I would know like what I was logically like saying and trying to get across was accurate. Maybe not 100%, but it was always at least a portion of it is correct, if not 100%. And so anytime I would have to be faced with conflict with him, I would automatically like have that fight response because I knew that he was just going to come back and he was going to jab and he was going to jab and jab and jab and jab. And I would literally almost have like the conversation in my head just so that I could like come up with logical reasons for every single thing that he was going to jab at me.
Like you knew how it was going to play out in that sense.
Exactly. And so it became like a pick and choose your battles because obviously when you're faced with that fight or flight response like day in and day out, like that's not good for your body. That's not, you live off of adrenaline, which isn't good, and it drives up your stress hormones. Like it wrecks your body, it wreaks havoc upon your body. And so it got to the point to where I was just tired and there would be things that really needed to be addressed that I would go and just let go of and just not, it would just go underneath the surface. And so then it would end up building and building and building and building and building until I finally just like would explode. And then of course that turns into like me like reacting and then him in return saying I was the narcissist because of how I was reacting. And
did I say you were the narcissist?
You said that a couple of times.
Really? I was just curious. I've had people ask me that and I was like, I don't remember if I did or not.
It was, there was only like a couple of times, like a couple of situations that I remember. There was like a couple of things that turned like so bad and I was just like so angry. And you were like, I'm sitting here calm, like you're the narcissist. Like,
okay.
So it wasn't like you would call me a narcissist like day in and day out, but it was very.
And that had to be after I started like learning about it. It wasn't like before I even knew about the term or anything like that. Like after I started learning about it, that I'd, insert that into conversations. I think like with both of us being logical, there's probably a lot of times in our arguments and in trying to either get you to react or get that response that like, can you kind of talk to some of the aspect of like the confusion or like in one sense, like the word salad or like different stuff that I would like put on you that would try to make the conversations be like completely like, what are we even talking about? Did it feel like I confused you a lot of times with some of those?
Yeah, I think in one sense that's in one sense he you would do that because it would start off with one topic and then you would insert something like just a little something. I mean, if I should have had
Hmm.
an example, but you would insert, say we were talking about dogs and we were like discussing dogs, and you would insert something about like a cat's tail, like just slide it in there,
Hmm.
and then we would get on the topic of cats and you're like, I don't even know what we're talking about now. Like, it's your fault because we started on this topic and now you're
Hmm.
on this topic.
Right.
And so you would confuse me and we would switch topics, but then you would in turn like blame it on me that we were switching topics and not staying on
And
topic
that's
of
normally
like
when I'd come
whatever.
in with like we just have a communication issue. We need to go to counseling
Right.
because of our communication issue. But then I would never do anything about it.
Right. Right.
It's like I just use
Exactly.
that as the excuse of like, I don't remember the exact phrasing, but I'd use the excuse of like, this is just like, communication problem, and like if you could figure out how to communicate with me or stuff like that. Sorry, I'm not trying to like trigger anybody right now, but like that would be like the idea of like blaming on communication, but at the same time not doing anything in my power to actually fix it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. And so I think it got to the point to where there would be times when I would literally walk away in just like disbelief of like what just even happened, like is there something wrong with me? But like I could sit there and I could go back through the conversation and be like what did we even just like discuss for the past like 30 minutes or like whatever it may have been, and like I was really like at that point confused. And so and in my mind, like logically I was like, I don't think there's anything wrong with me, but then it started making me feel like something was wrong with me, like I wasn't doing something right. I was the wrong purpose, like I was wrong in how
Hmm.
I was communicating or conveying things or whatever it may be. And
Yeah.
then yeah, I started learning more about like narcissism and
Right,
all of
because we
that.
see that a lot with, I mean, a lot of the people that I talk to on a day-to-day basis that are going through it and trying to figure out, like, a lot of times the phrase I'll use is like trying to help provide like clarity now to like the confusion and the crazy making, because that's what
Mm-hmm.
it feels like when you're in the middle of it.
Yeah,
Like that's what
100%.
it feels like, and like the arguing that makes you feel like either one you're wrong, or like two like the argument doesn't even exist. Like why in the world are we talking about this? Or I guess like you were kind of alluding to even sometimes of like even the questioning of like am I the narcissist or am I the abuser or am I the crazy person that's like not letting this relationship actually blossom and grow?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
No,
And I had a thought, but now it just
it's okay.
disappeared. If it comes back, then I'll answer it.
But like in you kind of mentioned that as far as like the feeling of like crazy making, what did you feel? I guess is there anything else you want to say about like the crazy making feeling of like the communication, or on the flip side, if someone's going through that right now, what are some of the tools that you use to leverage to help like reduce the crazy feeling and like kind of ground yourself back to reality?
I think in one sense, I don't know, I'm sure there are people out there who can relate to this, but I would almost at times, because I would know how the conversation was going to typically play out, I would do like fighting and flighting. So in my mind, like I would almost like disassociate the conversation of like, I'm going to have this conversation with you. I'm going to put my points out there. But at the end of this conversation, I'm going to just sit in the confusion for maybe like 30 seconds and then be done with it. And so
Mm.
just kind of that like disassociation of like, if not, then like I'm just going to continue to be beat down even more than what I already am.
It's
And
almost like
so,
a radical acceptance of like that you can say your points, but it's not going to go anywhere.
right. And for
Okay.
me, because I am just a logical person and I also am very like outspoken, um, a lot of people are probably like listening who know me and are like, really? I am. But I
Right.
try to contain it. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I am outspoken. And so if I need to say something, like I'm going to say it. And so that's kind of like how it was. Like if I wanted to have this conversation, I was just going to say it. I knew that it probably wasn't going to be responded well. But in my mind, I had already like accepted that it wasn't going to be responded well and would disassociate from it and just let him like do whatever. And then there would be times that like I would think that there was going to be a different response, like just maybe. And then that's when I would notice that I would have more of the stress symptoms of like having anxiety or like whatever. Like this is just the worst thing ever.
Right. Because there's a lot of there's a lot of stress and anxiety that I put you on, of like, feelings of like anxiousness, panic at times, just like a lot of different fears in one sense that were there of trying to like hide from those, and also, that caused a lot of reactions.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is at times that like I would have like reactive like abuse to him of like yelling at him
Hmm.
or getting so angry that like I would like throw a pen across the room or whatever, and he would be like sitting in the chair literally like looking at me like you're a psycho.
Hmm.
And like I was just like, and in those moments like I just like I would freeze almost, like I would have that like freeze response of like what just happened, like this is not who I am, this is not who I want to be, this is not like any of that.
Hmm.
And so it's like it just comes from like this deep seated root of like anger and like bitterness and like hurt that you just are like you just like want to like rage, and then you have to take a step back because they're going to use that obviously against you, and he would be like you're the crazy one, like what are you doing?
Right. Yeah, I remember there definitely like there's times where stuff like that would happen. I don't remember specifically if I did it with the like the one door. I think the door was like falling apart and you like slammed the door or whatever, and like it broke off the hinges or whatever. But I do know like that's like an aspect that like I would assume like in the moment, like when that happens, you're just like, holy cow, like what just happened, or like how did I end
Yeah.
up in this place where I'm responding like this?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that was used to his advantage, because I think that, I mean, there was a door, like that was actually like true. There was a door, and I'm pretty sure, like 99% sure it was like breaking, and I just didn't realize it and I
Right.
slammed it. And so obviously he used that against me. He was like, "Wow, you're so angry, you like broke the hinges off the door." But then
Hmm.
because in my aspect, like I was angry, I like brought back up when he like busted the tide like
Oh yeah,
laundry
long
detergent
time ago,
long time ago.
like
And
very
I was like
beginning of
I
marriage.
was like you're
And
going to call me out on that when you like made a mess like
right,
in the
right,
beginning of marriage. And so then he would also use that against me, because he would sit there and say, "Why are you bringing up stuff that's like happened like 7 years ago?"
right.
And so
Which is typical for someone with like
right.
narcissistic personality to sort of like trying to like the past is in the past, like we don't bring that up, we don't like discuss that anymore, like we got to be able to move past it.
Mhm.
And there be an aspect of it was always acceptable. Well, I guess a lot of people get confused because it was always acceptable in my mind and how I like played out in the relationship. It was acceptable for me to bring up your past, but like you couldn't bring up my past. Like you couldn't bring
Correct.
up stuff that I was accountable for. So like,
Mhm.
me hitting the Tide detergent and it like busting everywhere like early on in marriage, like that was like an off topic. Like you can't bring that up. But then like I don't know, like I could bring up something that was like, dating, and that would be like viable in my mind of like I can bring this up, but you're not allowed to say anything else.
Right. Yeah. And so that was obviously like triggering and frustrating for me, and it was just kind of like those like underhanded like jabs to like get a reaction.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think a lot of times people get confused about that and confused about like the reactive abuse of how it actually happens, because then that's typically what switches in people's mind of like, wait a second, maybe I'm the abuser.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm the person because I just threw that pen across the room, I just slammed the door, I just, all that kind of stuff. Like, did that kind of ever go through your mind, or was it just kind of like walking yourself back through it in one sense?
Yeah, I mean, I there was at times that I did wonder like if it was me or if I was the abuser because of how I was reacting in those situations, because it took a while for me to even get up to that. And it even like made me wonder like if I had like postpartum like rage, because I
Mm.
already knew that I struggled with like postpartum depression and anxiety. So then it like added, but I was like it's not towards like anybody else but him. Like cuz postpartum rage is normally towards like a bunch of people, not just like
I
one
didn't even know that
specific.
was a thing.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But typically like that's just so like I was just like wondering all of this because I already knew that I was struggling a little bit with postpartum depression and anxiety. And so then I was like wondering like if I had postpartum rage or if like I was a narcissist, like if I had like some type of like psychological thing like wrong with me
Mm-hmm.
because of how I was reacting. But then like looking back, I let so much like get piled up, and it took like a while for me to even get to the place where I was reacting the way that I was.
Right.
Um,
It
because
wasn't
that
like
was
year one of marriage you were
no,
reacting that
like
way
this
at all.
was like year 7 or 8,
Right.
like no, 7.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was year 7. So 7 years of like all of this like emotional like turmoil and abuse and things like
Mm-hmm.
that just started like adding up. And so it was just, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. And can you talk a little bit at all as far as like the, I guess just anything else you'd want to say on like the crazy making side or like the symptoms kind of like coming out of that? Because I know you mentioned like early on like reacting, but then also like the stress symptoms that wreak havoc on, everything mentally, emotionally, physically. Like there's a lot of stuff that happens that is really hard to be able to process and that affects so much.
Yeah. So, I would struggle some with like obviously anxiety, just especially going into a conversation that I knew that we needed to have because I was already prepared that it was going to turn into an argument. And it was like super triggering. And so I would obviously like my heart would start racing, I would start feeling like flustered, things like that, but I got to where I would manage it very well. Um, and so it wasn't until I was struggling with postpartum depression and anxiety that like I started having like panic attacks. And in one sense, like that was quote unquote the only time that he would care
Right.
because you would always just like check on me, and then once I was done you would just like get up and walk away. Like it wasn't like there was like any like
It was like conditional too. Like I feel
yeah,
like there was times that like whenever you were struggling with that, I'd get more pissed off for a
yeah,
period of time, and then it'd like switch, and then I guess I was talking on a live the other day about it of like the idea of like comfort, like wanting to comfort you, like comforting you, like when it got really bad, but by that time you were like so terrified or you're so like distraught that there was like no way that I could, and then when I would like reach out to try to comfort and you wouldn't want that at that point because you felt unsafe, then I would get pissed off even more of like, well, see, like I'm trying to help you and you're refusing my help, like that
yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah. And so that then in my mind I was like, well, maybe I should just like suppress like how I'm feeling and just let him comfort me because maybe this is gonna like help something, or like obviously I'm doing something wrong because you know even though I feel
Hmm.
like after he just like yelled at me, like I don't feel like this is a safe environment, but like maybe if I do X, Y, and Z, then like whatever. So it's yeah, it was very twisted and hard.
Right.
Like looking back and like thinking about it, I'm just like,
Right.
wow, I was like in this huge like fog.
And I think it's key that even with all of that, logical and like rational thinking, like the end result didn't change anything.
Mm-mm. Like
And I
it
think that
maybe like 1 to 2 days like we would be okay, and then it would just go back. The same cycle would start all over.
right. And I was thinking that'd be key for us to be able to explain and to share like on this podcast because I don't think we've made like a disclaimer on every single podcast of like,
Right.
I'm a narcissist, you're not a narcissist, we're married and we're still together. And then, the majority of my stuff on my platform, I'm like, hey, if you're with a narcissist, leave.
Yeah.
And people look at that, people look at me, they look at, the platform I have and the people that I'm able to coach and influence and help them change. And then a lot of times they want to look and be like, well, you changed, like, or like they'll try to attach you to it of like you changed for your wife, or like, you chose her, you picked this, all this kind of stuff to try
Yeah.
to be like, when really like the thought behind it is like, how do I get my narcissist to do that? How do I get
Yeah.
my abuser to wake up and be nice to me, kind of a thing? So
Yeah.
like, you want to talk through some of that as far as like even the thought process of like logically, let me sacrifice this and maybe this will get better, and then it not, and then also just the reality of like, hey, it's not a bed of roses, being married to me, but also then why, even in your own words, someone should stay or not stay with a narcissist.
Yeah, so that was like a lot of
Sorry.
questions all at once.
None of this is written down. We literally have like reacting and stress symptoms written on a sticky note, and we're like, let's just talk. Um,
So would you like to ask me one question first?
yeah, yeah. So we can go with like one question first. So, I guess just explain a little bit how like the logic piece, like trying to deal with it logically and like sacrifice stuff, like didn't help.
Yeah. So it doesn't help. Like I'm just gonna I tried probably everything that you could imagine, um, to try to get him to change. And there was a point that I just realized nothing I did was going to help him change. Nothing. The only thing that was going to help him change was going to be God and himself. That's it. Like, those were literally the only two things that I knew was going to help him change at that point, when nothing, I was sacrificing my own mental health. I was sacrificing, um, like my comforts, like whatever it may be. I was sacrificing like all of this. I was giving up that safety piece. I was trying to be vulnerable as I could be at that point. Like it didn't matter what it was. Nothing was working.
Right.
So I think that that's where you kind of have to like figure out as far as how far are you willing to go to sacrifice things that they're more than likely not going to change for.
Because ultimately you'll just keep sacrificing and sacrificing and sacrificing and never getting any type of change behavior on the other side. Right. So that kind of like leads to like the other question of like, what would you say to someone who's like debating, but Ben changed, maybe I get my narcissist to change, or like maybe I should stay in the relationship. I think it helps to hear it not just from me, but from your perspective on, if they should stay, if they should go, or kind of just all that.
Yeah. I think that's something that I heard. I don't remember who it was from. I'm pretty sure it was somebody either on TikTok or Instagram. I don't know. But I heard you have to choose your hard. And staying is going to be hard and going is going to be hard. And I think there are so many people who think that staying is the easy route or going is the easy route. One or the other is the easy route. They're both hard. They're hard in their own ways. And so for me, for the longest time, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to choose my hard. Like, I do love him, so I'm just going to stay. And then there got to be a point to where staying was the worst thing for my mental health. And I started realizing that I was not going to be able to show up for my daughter if I continued down the path that we were on. And so that is when I left. And that was also incredibly hard. Like, I was leaving the comfort of my own home to go back and live with my family. And my family is great, and I'm very thankful that I have that, because some people don't. But it's also you're taking yourself out of your routine. You're taking yourself out of something that's already comfortable for you, and that's your only safety, is like your normal everyday routine. So that's hard, but you're also doing it because at the end of the day, this is what's going to be the best. And me leaving did not change him at all, like at all. It took several months.
Right. There's a lot more, a lot of other things.
Right. A lot of other things. And
we don't have time to dive into today. Right. But, yeah, I think, wow. Like, I think that was really good. And I think that's really awesome just to be able to hear you say that. Like, your mic dropping and dropping fire on it of like, choose your heart. That's a huge aspect that I think a lot of people don't think of when they're in the relationship. They're just like, oh, leaving is too hard. And I think I heard someplace else too, like the idea of, people are only going to change, when their current circumstances are painful enough for them to change. And so I think it complements that really well of like, you have to choose your heart. You have to be like, no, this is harder to stay than it is actually the pain of leaving and starting over, so that I can, be safe mentally and emotionally and be able to process stuff, because otherwise that confusion is so full, so filled up, it's hard to be able to get anywhere in life.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
Anyways, thank you guys so much for listening today. Really do appreciate it. Feel free to be able to like, rate, and review, share the podcast episode, because we've been really shocked that it's been growing so fast. So please give it a share, give it a review. If you want to follow me or my wife, we'll have the links down below in the bios. And thank you all so much. Y'all have a great day.
Yeah, thanks. We'll see you next week.